And I do understand your frustration and perhaps the perception. But when you are not allowed to prosecute, if the head of the NPA does not give you that opportunity, I cannot take a matter. I am not an island, nor was the team.
What happened to former NPA prosecutor Andrea Johnson? Explosive old interview footage has resurfaced, and it's raising serious questions. Johnson claimed former President Thabo Mbeki blocked a prosecution and alleged interference by Menzi Simelane in high-profile cases. She also made shocking claims involving Pravin Gordhan and Luthuli House. Why is this video making headlines again after her testimony before the Madlanga Commission? Stay tuned as we break down every explosive detail.
The cases that were involved in high number, one J8 versus J7, and we know in that case there were a lot of drug laws that involved people who facing trouble of murder. Nothing was done, and you don't in your explanation or whether than say I was removed. That's all of it. No.
I think,
is it not a situation of say, well, I got what I want and then I don't care?
I think you're incorrect in part in your summation. It is incorrect to say nothing happened. Glenn Agliotti was found guilty for drug trafficking. Clinton Nassif was found guilty for drug trafficking. Those were the main kingpins in terms of the drug matter. Paparas, the matter went to court. We had a full trial. Yes, they were acquitted, but there was a full trial. I think the only place where there must still be an issue is that in terms of the murder matter itself, that is where the 204s came into being, with the Mikey Schultz and those people. But that matter went on trial. So I don't want us to create the perception or the idea that there were no prosecutions. Yes, there were. I do agree with you that the public perhaps feels more than just them ought to have been prosecuted.
As I understand it, because please correct me if I'm wrong. If I correctly recall, he was not pardoned by the court, is it not so? His evidence was not accepted, and therefore he was not pardoned, ought to have, out of that case, alignment from that case, if I'm wrong, please correct me, it's not a wrong. Ought to have been followed, and that one was just right in your hands to do that.
Whilst certain things seem to have been right in our hands, at the time, do not forget who the head of the NPA was. The head of the NPA at the time was Menzi Simelane. We had serious issues with him as the national director in terms of not understanding what we wanted to prosecute. It is out of that we had the Janwala Commission of Inquiry. And so when that matter was done, we were done. We were not able and allowed to deal with any other matters. So whatever may have flowed, you are right. Something ought to have happened. But we were not given an opportunity for that to happen.
So, to us, we are telling us that at least maybe that year he was in that year.
Yes.
He was in that year until after that.
Yes, because it is on his instructions that we were removed from the matters. And even if you take the Mulangi Mpehu matter, there are other matters, sir, that ought to have gone to court that we initially started. And I do understand your frustration and perhaps the perception. But when you are not allowed to prosecute, if the head of the NPA does not give you that opportunity, I cannot take a matter. I am not an island, nor was the team.
All right. In these circumstances, because at the end of the day, we are not...
Did you hear that? Johnson said Menzi Simelane interfered and that her team was removed from matters on his instructions. She claimed other cases should have reached court, but prosecutors were not allowed to proceed. The panel then asked the obvious question: if the head of the NPA interferes with a prosecution, where can an ordinary prosecutor go for help? That question opened the door to the biggest bombshell in the interview. Watch the entire exchange. Johnson was not merely asked whether there had been interference. She was asked whether the president himself was involved.
We are seeking to employ a head of that institution who is a prosecutor. That is a head and leader.
Yes.
Now, for that leadership, you just have to get to some of your background.
I understand.
Actually, the guide in the constitutional court. My point is, here is a senior interfering unduly in the prosecution of the case. What are the remedies available to those juniors who feel strongly that no, these things that this person wants us to do are wrong and unlawful? What are your options?
If one takes at the time, and the fact that at the time he was the national director, honestly, if you asked me then, I think apart from the fact that one was so shocked that he even went that far, there wasn't anywhere to go to. And I'm being honest, at that time, I'm not saying now we don't have that recourse. I think we have at the moment a Minister of Justice that is open and one is able to raise the complaint of the NDPP's interference on that level. We have a president with whom one can raise those issues. At the time, we didn't have that. We had a president at the time, and that must be his decision. But it is a decision that is communicated to us. We had a president at the time who did not want us to proceed with that prosecution. So what I'm saying is...
In that case, you are suggesting that there was an influence from the president as well. You were the president who doesn't want us to proceed with the case, meaning that he was involved in some way into the case. Because he doesn't want to proceed with the case.
Most correctly so, and that was aired and ventilated in great detail during the Ginwala Commission of Inquiry. The role of the then president, the role of Menzi Simelane then as the DG of Justice and his inappropriate conduct. And then, you know, as Murphy's Law would have it, he ended up being the national director at the time we're conducting these prosecutions. So at the time, yes, our hands were tied. I think things have changed in terms of our ability to raise these issues, albeit not within the NPA as it currently stands.
Yes, that's exactly where I am. South Africa has been a constitutional democracy since 1994. In fact, when this dispensation kicked in, where the constitution of the Supreme Court, no one could be apart that law, even the president himself. But now it sends me, if I'm calling to investigate, if next year, or next year, the election next year, if some president some president who has different views and this understanding, then again the NPA would succumb to nominations.
No.
No, you're stating that you're saying things that different because of the president who is different than that one. Meaning that our independence as the NPA is dependent on who the president is. Is it not a suggestion correct that I'm accepting?
No. I'm saying to you, as it was. If you consider where we're at now as the NPA, this is the first time. Take your constitution of this panel. It is a first time. And the reason for it is to make sure everyone understands the role, function, and the independence that the national director not ought to have, will have. And so regardless, and I say this tongue-in-cheek, Chair, so if I am appointed as the national director, who the president is, and I say this respectfully, will not deter from the work I have to do. It will not deter from what the people in the NPA will be requested to do. That is the difference. The difference is, and I think it pains me a lot because I've actually had this discussion with the previous national director. When he was appointed, I was the coordinator at PCLU. He was a senior state advocate at the time. He gets appointed. He's moved out of our office, obviously. And at a stage when I was able to, I asked for a meeting with himself. And I remember sitting across from him and telling him, I want you to please remember in your chair that perception is half the battle. Do not allow perceptions about the NPA and how we function to continue. Deal with it head on. He chose not to listen. And what I'm saying is, give credence to the 11 candidates you've shortlisted. We are ready to stand tall. I cannot put only me. I look at your shortlist. I think every single person is ready to stand tall and say what was can no longer be.
The point is, I'm making is that, in fact, we have agreed that in that institution, that is NPA, and I don't understand you want to say, well, the instability at the head office cannot judge whether instability reflecting the picture or the image of the NPA. Every institution is looked at with reference to its leadership, is it not?
It is so.
Yes, so let's agree today, you agree, that in that NPA, there is complete chaos within the leadership, and that leadership has to be fixed. I think that one we have to agree so that we move forward and give you the answer that the question statement that you just made.
No, I can't even add to that, because that is God's truth. If we're going to move away from that, then it is irrelevant who you appoint as the head of the NPA. And I want to say this. I talked when we found out that there might be a panel put together as the president envisages a different process to appoint the head of the NPA. I actually remarked to a colleague, where the NPA is currently, you can appoint the Pope. The place as it is now, if it is not changed, will chew the Pope out and spit him out alive. It is a different animal. You need to walk in there accepting the reality of what it is. I have raised my unhappiness with how matters are assigned, how people are brought from different units to deal with matters. All of the issues that need to be raised are raised at a management meeting. That is my line of protocol that I have to observe. So no one keeps quiet about it. The issue is raised. I raise it in my management meeting.
You said, when I asked you a question, whether have you been pressured in pursuing criminal proceedings against any individual to advance political agenda, you said no.
No, not that I know that it's a political agenda.
All right. Now, you stated earlier that there is a lot of political interference with the NPA. Okay? That's what you said?
Yes.
You recall that?
Yes.
What did you mean by that?
I look at the matters that are currently running, and it is my perception that there is political interference.
Is it a perception or fact? You stated that as a fact, that there is political interference.
Then let me correct myself. I have a perception there because I don't deal with those matters directly. I look at the state capture matters and I look at what one ought to have done and where those matters are. If I take the Estina Dairy matter, for example, I would not have dealt with the matter in that way. I am of the firm view that there are certain matters for which we step back because there's political interference. If I take the matter, for example, with...
Would that be a perception or a fact?
The state capture matter, I have a perception. If I take the Praveen Gordhan prosecution, there I say it's political interference, but it is based...
Let's not talk about... I don't want us to talk about a particular case. I was talking about political interference, and you said that is only your perception.
In terms of certain matters, yes. And in terms of the one matter...
matters that you actually know that there is here as a fact, not a perception that there has been a political interference.
Of my own personal knowledge, no. But
you would not have stated it, Advocate Johnson, that there is political interference if it was only a perception.
Perhaps, I think it's a fine line to draw between the perception and the reality. And if you'd allow me an opportunity to explain the why. If there are certain matters where, if you look at the state capture and how slow we are going, that is my perception. And I think I take it from where I am as a prosecutor and how one would have dealt with the matter. It's a perception. But if I take an actual prosecution, if you'd please allow me, sir, if I take an actual prosecution, if you take, for example, the Praveen Gordhan matter, the reason I say this political interference is the national director goes to a meeting at Lutuli House. It's in the public domain. The very next day, there is an announcement that there is a prosecution. That cannot be perception.
All right.
I may not have been privy to the meeting, and that is why I'm saying in some instances, the perception is not based on a thumbs up. I guess it is more about what you know should happen with matters and what actually happens with matters. Same like what you raised when we dealt with the late Jackie Celebi matter and or with the Section 204s. There's a perception that how a matter ought to have been and how it actually was is incorrect. And that is what I'm saying to you. I can't take away that perception, nor can anyone take away my perception that how matters are currently dealt with, as opposed to how they ought to have been dealt with, create the perception that there is political interference.
Let me tell you what I find odd about the applicants that come from the NPA that came before this panel, that have stated numerous times that there is instability in the NPA, but failed to admit or to disclose what is really at the root cause. They have all, including yourself, they have all been coy about exactly what is going on. You mentioned political interference, you don't want to take it further than that. Right? You don't want to take it further than that. I'm not going to pursue you to actually take it further. I'm just stating the fact as I'm seeing them unveiled before us. That you state all this infighting, personal, narrow personal interest in the NPA in relation to all your colleagues, but you don't want to take it further than that. You just simply hinting at that. It's fine. Let's not take it further than that.
No, but I think that would, in all fairness, that would be unfair, because I have alluded to instances, for example, where I was removed from a unit, and I know that, and I said the who, I said the why, where we were removed from matters. I think what you must have an appreciation for, Advocate, is not just myself and for the rest of my colleagues. This is an interview for the position of the National Director. I remain an employee of the NPA. I have to be honest and upfront.
This interview was recorded in 2018, but it sounds like evidence given for South Africa today. Andrea Johnson claimed that Menzi Simelane interfered with prosecutions and removed her team from matters. She said a president did not want a prosecution to continue, and when asked whether that president was involved, she answered, "Most correctly so." She admitted the NPA's leadership was in complete chaos and warned that the institution would chew up even the Pope and spit him out alive. Then she pointed to the Pravin Gordhan prosecution and a meeting at Luthuli House as evidence of what she believed political interference looked like. Years later, Johnson herself would stand before the Madlanga Commission and face serious questions about interference, judgment, and prosecutorial conduct. So here is the question South Africa must answer. Was Andrea Johnson the fearless prosecutor who warned us about a captured and broken system, or did she eventually become trapped inside the same system she once exposed? Write your thoughts in the comments. Please like and share the video. And finally, subscribe to Mzansi News Hub for more interesting news updates.